Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this exciting session at the Chief Technology Officer Summit. I'm here with Steve Ardire, a renowned AI startup advisor. I'm very excited for this session. This is a hot topic out there for those listening of how to scale your startup, your AI-focused startup. Steve, so excited to have you here. I know you do a lot of these. You speak to a lot of events. You're a coach, high in demand. Just from doing your bio, I mean, you've advised and helped so many companies, and we're very privileged to have you here. So thank you for being here, Steve.
Thanks for the invite, Steven.
Oh, you're welcome. And for those listening, we've had some internet issues with the connection on Steve's side, so he's not on video. Maybe if his internet connections with our Riverside technology improve, we'll be able to see him. So right now we're just on voice with Steve. So thank you, everyone, for being patient on this one, but we're glad at least we could hear you, Steve.
That's the key thing. Video is we can eliminate that until we hopefully recorrect on but we can get started when you're ready.
Perfect. So to kick things off, could you tell us a little bit what inspired you to focus on AI startups, specifically when you have a big background in technology and helped other companies? Why did you focus on it? Where do you see the big value happening with AI?
Okay, good start question. So in 2013, I was working as an advisor, strategic advisor to a startup that was kind of like an IBM Watson like. Actually, two of the principals were ex-IBM, and they had made some internal pitches to the executive team at IBM with their idea. This is, of course, IBM Watson, which came to fruition in January of 2014. So they decided to go off and, do their own startup, not, exactly similar to Watson, but it had some of the, underpinnings. So I came in recruited by the CTO, who was ex-SAP, and really clicked there, and then kind of wove my experience and before AI per se, I was very deep into semantic technology. A lot of people forget, AI just didn't come about with generative AI. It's actually pretty ridiculous with everybody being a generative AI. It's not the only type of AI, period. I mean, it's kind of like taken over. But that was really the onboarding, and there was very minimal amount of clients. They had Boeing and a few other clients, but they really needed to get a VC funding. So I cultivated Intel Capital. Actually, at that time, through an Intel fellow who really liked what we were doing better than his own internal project that he had. And he said, hey, I think I want to work with Saffron Technologies, his name is startup. So he got a business champion, got an endorsement there. We delineated like 4 use cases. And once we had that buttoned up, they gave us an on-ramp onto Intel Capital, and we got $6 million. So that was really the real introduction into AI. And then after all the hard work and the cultivation that I did for getting the funding and the positioning there, the CEO of the startup said, well, thank you, we don't need you anymore. And so I said, fine. And I decided to switch my tactics and really start to do multiple rather than one AI gig assignment. And that's what I do to this day, Stephen.
You went into your background of why you chose to focus on AI startups. And what we heard from you was your experience at IBM. If you could repeat that for us, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'll give you the backstory.
It was very valuable.
Yeah, so I've been advising startups for like 30 years. And in 2013, that was sort of like the an inflection point to really change my modality into full-on, full-bore AI. And the means to that end was an engagement with a startup in Silicon Valley called Saffron Technologies, where it was actually two former IBM people that formed this startup, and it was kind of like elements of IBM Watson. I mean, a different AI deliverable, but it had similar constructs. So I came in as a strategic advisor, working with the founding team and the CTO, and literally said, "Hey, you're pitching this all wrong," because they were just flagging it in terms of getting interest from VCs. They just didn't know how to really position themselves. So I actually work with the CEO and the CTO and the ex-IBM principals to kind of re-swizzle the pitch to make it much more compelling, and which we did. And I said, listen, I think I got a good inside angle, because I had done some work with Intel before. So I happened to we met up with one of the Intel fellows there that just, sometimes it's serendipitous, that had a project that he was working on. It was kind of like a backroom project, but he wanted to bring it to fruition. And when he saw and heard from what we were doing, he said, "Oh my gosh, what you have is better than what I have internally. So I'd like to work with you." So he became our technical champion, and we identified like 4 or 5, projects that we could deploy, together. He got a business sponsorship to give him, the backing. And then once we had that, because he knew we were looking for funding, we said, well, why don't I provide an on-ramp to Intel Capital, which happened. And before Christmas, I think we had a term sheet and a deal, and $6 million. And so it was a big success. It was a big win. And in March or April of 2014, the CEO said, "Well, thanks for all your excellent work. We wouldn't be here, but we don't need your services anymore," which is fine. And then I changed my playbook to, rather than just working with one or two, I decided to spread my bandwidth over anywhere from 5 to 7 or 8, AI startups, and I continue that to this day today.
Thank you for sharing that. Great background. And then, as you're working with all these AI startups, what is the biggest challenge you see for them now and going forward in 2024 and beyond?
Yes, it's a great question, Stephen, because today, unlike 10 years ago, most people think they're a subject matter expert in AI. It's insane. It's insane. It is absolutely insane. Not only do they, the startup and their people, the co-founders, and a lot, the co-founders, if you're a tech bro and a data scientist or machine learning, yeah, you probably know your P's and Q's in data science and ML and can code, right? But they don't know all the other ingredients in terms of how to field the right team, the right players, how to really nail the product market fit. And that's a challenge. And on the flip side, the VCs also are more inflated about what they think they know, but in reality, they really don't. And in fact, very few of them, like I said, I've been advising startups for 30 years. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And today, VCs, especially, it's dealing. You don't want to deal with the associates, senior associates, maybe a principal here and there, but I would venture to say, I don't have the metrics. I would say 80% of VCs have never done their own startup. Yet they're giving you evaluation and guidance on what is right and what their interest is. So it's a real fallacy, but you got to play through.
Yeah, and what's your playbook for playing through?
Yes, and that's the art of the deal. It's both art and science to play through. So I'm raising. I've done more, but I've got two startups, My Plan Keeper AI and Attune Media Labs, that were raising a pre-seed and seed respectively. You really have to do extreme due diligence in terms of looking really, really closely at the thesis, the portfolio, the players at the VC. And I mean, really, really granular, okay, to get a really good read on who to reach out to. It isn't spray and pray. It's like selective rifle shooting to where you can really, get the aperture, get the lock on to where you think, the matchup of what the startup is doing fits to, the thesis and, getting to the right, person there. And before raising pre-seed, which goes up to like $1 million, is the hardest tranche of money to raise, because you have a proof of concept, minimally a proof of concept, and it's got to be a damn good POC to show where your roadmap is going to a minimal viable product that is deployable for early adopters to get traction, to be followed up by a commercial viable product. So you've got to really, it isn't just VCs. I mean, if you get angels that are really passionate and have done it themselves, and you're finding more angels that have actually done more startup success than VCs. So you look at your avenues, right, of funding. Friends and family, probably not, unless you've got some really wealthy ones. You may get, I don't know, 50, 100,000. But that's where angels come in. If you're connected, that is. And most of the startups, unless they've done it before, if you're like a first time out of the chute, you don't have that. So that you really got to come up, and that's what I do, is really come up with a great target list. It isn't, cookie cutter. It's customized for each gig, specific to their offering there. And you've really got to have a really super compelling pitch. I mean, really super compelling, that really lays it out. And what most startups don't understand is the team counts for about 60% of the weighting criteria. So just like for My Plan Keeper, one on that I'm a chief AI officer and chief partnership officer and filling in as, temporary, chief data officer as well. I said, listen, we're not going to float our pitch until we have our proof of concept ready to go, because you don't get funding just on pitch. You can if you're from Silicon Valley, and it's really kind of funny here, is, if you're if you're in the club, ex Facebook, Google, whatever, right? You get a free pass, all right? Even though you don't even have a product, right? You're going by prior reputation. If you're in that little clubby circle, right, like a fraternity, they say, oh, you did it before, you can do it again, which is mostly bullshit. So 99+% of startups have to do it the old-fashioned way, which is stand up that compelling POC, close the pre-seed funding, move quickly to stand up an MVP and get some early adoption, and then raise a follow-on seed round. So you raise what you need along the way. Don't overraise, because that you're seeing so many, like last year, for instance, there was so many write-offs from VCs. Do you know that most VCs' portfolio, only 5% of their portfolio companies get a 4 to 5x return? That's really pretty minimal, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, most and the other thing too is 9 to 10 startups still fail for many reasons. Run out of money, the team doesn't click, the product market fit is wrong. So it's a tough road which is why you've got to be very precise on your critical path, because you'd have no time. You don't. It's really going to hurt you if you make mistakes along the way. And you talk about pivots. There's really no, if you know what the hell you're doing, there's no need to pivot. You just do smart tactical execution.
No, and as you're talking about companies trying to raise that money, how do AI startups identify and effectively reach their target market? Because that having the idea, building the POC, but reaching that audience that are going to give credibility, what strategies have you found that worked for companies?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to say what is your offering? Is it a pure SaaS play? Okay. Like we're doing at My Plan Keeper, although that will change, or you're doing an app, of course, iOS and Android, right? What is the target market, right? Are you, if you're a D2C, you're going to have an app for sure, direct to consumer. But really, if you can be like we're doing at My Plan Keeper, we're a hybrid. We have both a B2B2C for corporate lifestyle wellness, and a direct to consumer, right? So you've really got to get the right frame on the revenue model, and then be able to have, to deliver accordingly on both ends. I mean, sometimes the D2C fuels the B2B2C, and vice versa. So you have to be able to execute on both, initiatives. And I cannot emphasize, okay, how the right partners. So that's the other, key part of the framework is getting the right partners, where you don't have to create everything from ground zero. So in other words, like what we're doing at My Plan Keeper, we're I mean, in generative AI, everybody and their mother seems to go, that's why OpenAI has, such, fanfare, even with all its flaws. So we chose Core AI, which is a significant player in conversational AI. They are doing 100 million annual recurring revenue. They've got like 400 customers, fintech, healthcare, and they just closed $150 million. They made an announcement yesterday or the day before. So everybody reads like through TechCrunch, Anthropic, the billions and billions from Amazon. So what all the big cats are doing is that they're hedging their bets, right? Like Microsoft has 10 billion in OpenAI, Anthropic. So all the big cats want to hedge their bets, right? So where does it leave you as a startup? Are you just going to pick one of those LLMs, whether it be Google, OpenAI? I mean, if you can do it with, there's some really impressive open source LLMs as well. Well, we ended up choosing Core AI for the following reason. All the LLMs have a black box problem, bias in, bias out with hallucinations. They have a vulnerability to misguided human arguments, meaning that they don't really generate meaning and there's no understanding of what's true or false, what is right or wrong, lack of explainability. They just give you an answer, whether it's muddled, kind of like a combination of true and false. But if you're dealing in regulated industries like healthcare and fintech, that's a real slippery slope. And the other ingredient is that there's really the ethical and legal considerations. There's no guardrails, all right? So just like in Europe, for instance, there's legislation that do have ethical and legal considerations locked into the agreement, whereas in this country, they're pretty much letting, we'll trust you to do the right thing, which is really bullshit.
So I do want to, there are a couple of questions I have on what you just said. One of the first ones, and I know you're masterful at this, is the partnership part, right? I do want to get
Hmm.
into the AI and picking that one, but what advice do you have for those CTOs on the call and those listening and will be listening around how do you know what partner to pick? Because I've been in that role before where everything says go pick a partner, but you just don't know how to start. Why would they want to partner with you who's just getting started? You're small. What value can you bring to them? So, yeah, share us your insight. Share us the magic, the secret sauce, because you are, out of everybody I've been talking to, a master at this. So please shed some light for us.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for locking on to that, Stephen, because it's so, so, so important. When I, the other thing that I didn't mention, which I'll mention now, is Core AI as a startup program. It's kind of low profile, but I knew about it, and what a lot of most startups do when they're like the first timers, right? They go to Y Combinator or Techstars, or another one, but those are the two biggest ones, right? So you're going to get $500,000 and you're going to have to give them 7% of your company. What are they going to do for you? So essentially, they bring in their purported list of advisors that are really going to like educate you in ins and outs, all the trials and tribulations, right? But out of that, do you know this? That only 2% of graduates from Y Combinator and Techstars actually close seed funding. When you come out of those, accelerators, if you don't have, they're not going to educate you on, similar to VCs, right? Yeah, most of them really don't add value besides the money. Kind of similar with the accelerators and incubators. And venture studios is even more nuanced because you're going to have to give up more, equity to them. So if you can do it on your own accord, like and with Core, we're getting way better. We're getting development services and a 75% discount on first year services from them. That's huge. That's huge. Yeah, the big other, Amazon and through AWS and Google, they'll give you credits on, which is nice. Credits are good. As Microsoft does a lot of that. But if you know how to weave in the architecture, like we're doing with Core, the conversational AI capabilities, they have knowledge graphs which anchor. I mean, knowledge graphs really are one of the secret weapons because they store, rather than just having a large language model that is trained on scraped, web data. I mean, it's voluminous, right? But they don't know how to really, I mean, they always say, well, you can always fine tune your model, but there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of, black box problem, the biases, the hallucinations, misguided built in. So by going with a player like we did with Core AI, we're eliminating that because the knowledge graphs, right? You create knowledge infused models rather than knowledge aware that are brittle, that are suspect. And what you can do, especially in like I said, regulated industries, you can then do reasoning with increased accuracy on the context and semantics. So when you're really, you can fine tune them with greater flexibility, and the outcome is going to be much, much better.
How do you maximize that partnership? Because you talk about you've gone through picking the partner. How do you maximize the value you gain from that partner, right? And from what you can do, and how do you get them to be excited about you to get the returns?
Yeah, I mean that's really establishing a a vibrance of a healthy collaborative relationship where I mean they don't it's sort of like, they have their own criteria of saying, hey, does this, you have a startup program, but they must, they have their own criteria, and if you really meet their criteria and have chemistry with, the startup team like we've established, at Core AI, And there's other ones. I'm just using them because this was a big week for them to really kind of become a unicorn. And we were in there. That's the beauty of it. So was my reading of the tea leaves accurate? Absolutely 100%. Because when they come in, I had no, they kept this pretty low, low visibility, close to their vests on the funding, right? But if they can come in rather than just
Yeah.
saying, oh, Elon Musk, I'm raising $6 billion. It's not how much goddamn money you raise. It's what you do with the money, especially startups that have a much lower threshold, right? So the whole AI arms race from the big cats is I'm gonna out. It's sort of like you're at the poker table. I'll see your 4 billion and raise you 2 billion. It's just ridiculous. It's absolutely insane. So if you're smart and you do, you have the savviness to couple up the right partnerships. First of all, your vision. They love the vision from Carla Garcia, the CEO founder of My Plan Keeper. But vision only takes you so far, right? You've got to be able to put the product the first POC, the product deliverables. You've got to get that right. And we really, really worked, shoulder to shoulder to get that right. And you're not going to get that typically. I don't want to be exclusionary, but by going through, an accelerator, incubator, or venture studio, maybe a venture studio, you might have a chance. But so this is the right avenue for us. And, once we'll have a POC next week, then we can go out with much more assuredness of being able to find 2 or 3 investors that see the value here and are willing to make a smart bet at our pre-seed round.
Okay, and I appreciate sharing that. And now, as you're going into this, and I know you are a mentor, a networker, but how crucial is mentoring, networking? We talked about partners to the success of a startup in these early phases.
Yeah, I mean, let me just spin that or modify the question a little bit. I've got a lot of relationship capital, as you alluded to, and I've got my own personal brand and reputation. So what I saw here is even, we didn't have enough of the right team. So I brought in the 3 advisors that really filled the holes in terms of giving enough, more credibility, to establish that. Because like I said earlier, 60% of the weighting criteria is on the team. So I already recognize that because I've been there before where, it wasn't there. And guess what? Funding became a non-starter. So you've got to hit all the check boxes in terms of, everybody says product market fit. Yeah, that's important, but it's really the team. And furthermore, you've got to get the team. It's sort of like, in sports metaphor, right? You can have a really talented, basketball or soccer team in terms of the caliber of their athletes. But if your opposing team really, really is coordinated and they really trust one another and they can execute, I would put my money on the less talented team that can execute smarter, faster, better. And that's how it is with startups.
And how do you create that team of when you may not have enough capital, but you may have a good idea where you're early stages? Because a team is expensive, right? So how do you create that team
Yes.
to prepare yourself for the fundraise?
That's a great question, Steven. So what, startups have to deal first and foremost is equity, okay? Because they don't got the capital. So you've got to be able, for your top line people, right? Yeah, if you don't have it in you to say, hey, I'm going to, work for equity until we close funding, it just goes with the turf. I mean, there's no, ways around it. It's like you do startups because you're taking a bet, a smart bet, hopefully, and that's what the founder co-founding team has, is that they deal with equity. But the same thing with advisors. Advisors are going to say, all right, I really like, what you guys are doing. I can lend my subject matter expertise and I can provide something. And let me get to advisors, having been one for 30 years. Most, when I see startups that have like way too many advisors, it's sort of like too many chefs in the kitchen and you're going to spoil the soup. Advisors need to do more than talk the talk. They need to actually walk the talk. And from my experience, and it's not just making it up, I've been there, I would say less than 10% of advisors actually can walk the talk. What do I mean by that? Help close funding through their connections, close partnerships, go out and facilitate, not saying they'd have to, soup to nuts customers, close deals. And the fourth ingredient is recruit people to the team. You're lucky to find advisors that do one of those four. I do 4 out of 4.
Yeah, finding someone like you is hard, and I mean, I've been impressed from the short we got to know each other with what you do so much for for a startup on all 4 of them to help them get to the next level. Now, going on what you've been speaking about and building up to from a CTO, companies getting founded, to get to that raise, pre-seed, seed, what kind of perfection or close to perfection should startups, like how should they know that they're ready for that, or how do they get ready for that? What does ready state look like to know that you're ready to get that funding? What are some of the ingredients that an advisor like yours would say, CEO, CTO, we need to get to this phase, right? We need to get here so that people will trust us and get the funding. What does that look like?
Okay, so for pre-seed startups, there's different dimensionality, but I'll stick with the pre-seed, which is the toughest money to close. So first of all, I didn't say this before, but it should be. I really like working with underestimated startups, not the bombastic ones that are already preaching the hype out of the gate. That's just not acceptable. So lean startups that have everything that we talked about, a great vision, product market fit, team, partnerships, right? So you go out and you close $500K to $1 million pre-seed on a safe from angels and VCs, right? And you got to have a really compelling POC. That's what I said earlier, right? So that's phase 1. Really targeted at the right angels and VCs. Then you stand up a functional minimal viable product that will be ready for early adopters, right? So this is where you can go from, perceived traction, that's what it is, it's a perception game, to actual traction with the MVP, and where you can actually start, booking monthly recurring revenue, right, from some of these early, adopters and trials, right? At that juncture, then you get locked and loaded to say, okay, that 500 to a million only takes you so far. So you've got to say, I've got to think about, raising a follow-on seed round, but it's going to be at a price round. So for instance, if you, come out on the pre-seed on a safe, like at a $7 million cap, that's not a price round. That will kick in to when you raise a seed round. So if you're raising 3 million seed when you have the CVP, commercial viable product, for a hard go to market, you say, well, geez, if I can raise that money at a 14 million pre-money valuation, the pre-seed investors have already doubled their money on paper in maybe 6 months, which is pretty outstanding. So they already have a 2x, kicker. And so at that juncture, at the pre-seed, at the seed round, 3 million, maybe more, then you can go hard to the go-to-market. And frankly, it's the core team with the advisors that will execute to bring you the first 1 to 2 million annual recurring revenue. Startups that hire a chief sales officer before that event are just fooling themselves and wasting money. So if the core team and advisors can't get you to 1 to 2 million ARR, there's something flawed there. Now, after that, what I like to say is get to 5 million to 10 million ARR in 2 to 3 years and growing organically. And perhaps, I'm not saying a priori, but perhaps no more funding is needed, or maybe a small A round. But the point is, when you're at 10 million ARR with the methodology that I just conveyed, your cap table is awesome, and VCs just own 20 to 25%, not 45 to 50 to 60%. And you see, the storyline where a lot of startups overraised, and the CEO and the founding team are now down at 5 to 10%, which is pretty comedic.
Yeah. Yeah, that gives a really good perspective for everybody here. And that would be a great trajectory. So going to a little bit of product development with AI, what are some of the common pitfalls you see in early stages as they're building this product, trying to leverage AI, trying to get them to proof of concept to the 5, maybe the 1 to 5 million? Give us a little background. What are the common pitfalls you see during product development?
So the project management has to be really, really precise. So in other words, if you have like I said, both you're pretty light because you can't afford paying $500,000 to a data science data engineer. And if you go offshore, right? And I've been with startups that do this, where you're relying on them to stand up, the application. It's a double-edged sword. They may not be the best people involved, right? And their offshore companies go to, the ones that are, the ones paying them the most, right? So if you're kind of a really tight budget startup that says, well, we want to develop, so it's a matter, that's why it comes right back down to what I said, Steven, before on getting the right partnership. If they have, the capabilities to save you a lot of the work, you're still going to need, internal people. Don't get me wrong. A back-end engineer, front-end engineer, UI, an API, but not a big team if you're really leveraging those partners. That's why the criticality of leveraging partnerships to stand up a lean startup is like the cat's meow today. But back to your question, executing on the product development, project management with supreme, tactical execution is the difference between hitting your MVP, then CVP, and not. And like I said, if you're only raising what you need, you don't have a lot of wiggle room here. So you really have to nail within 30, maybe 45 days, for a little wiggle room, those deliverables.
Yeah, that's tight time frame, but it keeps you, I guess, focused on the minimal viable features.
Yes, it does.
That
and
you
don't
need
boil
to deliver.
the ocean. That's why it's called POC is constructs. It's really not functional, but it shows you where this could, manifest into an MVP and then, then CVP. But yeah, the MVP, if you start doing feature creep and loading more stuff into it, that's not a smart move. You're going to, overcomplicate, and the other thing too, in the early adopter, that's where you're really getting the validation. So you give them enough there to say, hey, the whole point of it is, after a proof of concept, preferably, a paid, pilot, okay, then you can see like, oh, the client, whether, like in a B2B, right, for a corporate, HR department, I really like this. It's really going to save us a lot of time and effort rather than using some of these ossified offerings. And that's how you get beachheads established. And once you get the beachhead, you take the hill and you just keep on going.
Yeah, Steve, I am so glad I was able to chat with you. We're coming down here in the last minute. I think anybody who spends time with Steve Ardire is going to learn a lot, going to help them focus their company, going to help them learn how to scale, get ready for seed, Series A, and beyond. And I've been very impressed with the amount of time we spent. Please reach out to Steve. I think if you're listening, we're going to be listening. Apologize to you, but he is a man to help your company grow with AI technologies and beyond. Now, Steve, is there any last parting words you want to say to the audience that you haven't said yet? Any advice you would like to share with them on this topic of scaling their startup?
Yeah, and I also do on my website, forcemultiplier.steveardire.com. One thing I didn't fail to mention, Stephen, is that I do a lot of podcasts and webinars. And in fact, they're both planted up there. You can find me on LinkedIn, and my website is also on LinkedIn, Steve Ardire, Ardire. But I did a podcast last August on augmented intelligence will become the future work in healthcare. It has almost like 5,000 impressions. And then I just posted recently, like 5 days ago, a podcast with William Tannenbaum, who's a high-powered lawyer at Moses and Singer. He's really big into generative AI, IP. So we did a podcast on AI and data law, the world of healthcare startups. Again, that's my focus, healthcare and wellness, right? It already has 1,500 impressions. What will be going up next, which we didn't talk about in the podcast, maybe a follow-on, is how to do branding for early stage software startups. A lot of startups are clueless on how to brand themselves. Branding, but with a good purpose. And that will be put up, I think, sometime next week. So that's my add-on for this.
Oh, that's great. Who are you talking to for the branding? I'm excited to hear that one.
Yeah, the podcast was done through Carpenter NYC in New York. I've known those folks for a while. They do some really, they've got a great pedigree of clients and fintech, other areas, but they want to get into the startup world a little bit more. So that's why we did the podcast. I did this with Carla Garcia, the CEO of My Plan Keeper. So you'll see that up on LinkedIn and website hopefully next week.
Steve, so excited for you with all that you have going on, for the service you provide, for the people you're helping out. For the companies that have been able to get your advice. And for listeners, I urge you to listen to this podcast, visit the site. Thank you once again for participating. Thank you for those listening. And we have one more session for the CTO Summit, and we are going to be here with you guys. But Steve, appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for the invite, Stephen. Bye-bye.